Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now in the penultimate session of this very important conference on India Smart Grid Day. The entire purview or the subject of electric mobility has been engaging the attention of almost everyone throughout the world in the last few years. All of us know the push and pull factors that are working towards moving towards this whole initiative. As the population of the world grows, as the consumption of raw materials increases, we find that in 70s and 80s we used to say that we would be running out of petrol or crude oil in another 30 years or so. But in spite of some new finds and many newer ways of extracting the crude oil, whatever it is inside the Mother Earth, still we find that more or less the new finds have almost tapered or have reached a plateau. And the extraction of the crude oil also available within the earth is also somewhat reaching a plateau. So all said and done, on the other hand, with the rise in economic growth, with the rise in aspirational values of populations across the world, we find that the consumption has increased really many fold in the last 2 or 3 decades. Particularly in the last 1 decade or so, or 1.5 decades, powered and engineered by the 2 great population centers of the world, so to say, China and India. And the next, maybe after another decade or so, there are parts of Latin America which are going to play a major role, parts of Africa which are poised to enter into this high GDP growth phase. With all this, there would be pressures on the crude oil scenario in the world. Of course, scientists would find newer and newer ways of finding cheap alternatives to crude oil, whether it is shale gas or any other resource which can fill in this gap. But overall, in the coming years, there would be increasing pressure on trying to achieve ways and means of fueling the transportation requirement of the population. India particularly finds itself in a very interesting kind of scenario. India imports almost $100 billion worth of, more than $100 billion worth of crude oil every year. We are about 80% dependent on the import of crude oil. On the nuclear front also, due to different reasons, we are not able to progress much faster as we would hope and desire. Coal scenario is already very depressed in the sense that whatever coal is there is a lot of coal in India. They say about 400 years worth of coal deposits are there. But there are issues of tendering, there are issues of technology, there are issues of extracting the required quantities. So even in coal, we have had to depend to a fair extent on imported coal for our even power generation in the thermal sector. Hydroelectric power is limited. Many of these areas are in a very higher reaches. Some of them are in border areas of Arunachal or northeastern states, which makes it even more difficult to extract and to transport and to transmit that kind of power to the mainland India, where there are the major consumption centers of this kind of energy source. So India at the present moment, with all the increase in number of automobiles, the kind of consumption increase which is growing by leaps and bounds, according to our automotive mission plan which we made about 6 years back, 2006 to 16, 10-year automotive mission plan, we have set targets for ourselves in the country to achieve an increase of turnover in the automotive sector from something like $45 billion to $145 billion, almost a 3-fold increase in the 10-year period 2006 to 16. Similarly, increase in additional manpower employment by about 25 million. This is not in direct alone, but also indirect employment creation in the automotive sector. So by year 2020, we would be looking at something like annual production of 9 to 10 million cars in the country. We are at 2.5 or 3 million as of now, about 3 million. And it's going to increase to about threefold in the next 8 or 9 years. The number of two-wheelers, which is the mainstay of Indian population, much of Indian population is very young, students and those entering into the first-timers as in job employment. We are already producing about 14-15 million two-wheelers in the country. This is going to increase to 35 million two-wheelers by 2020. So when you look at these kind of figures, I am sure the mind-boggling requirement of crude oil, if we continue with the as-is, where-is scenario, is going to be a threatening and quite a major challenge to overcome. So in this context, the subject matter of today's conference, that is electric vehicles, assumes all the more significance. And it is in this light that Government of India recently has come out with a mission plan or a vision plan for 2020 for the entire range of hybrid and electric mobility for the road transportation sector in the country. Under this mission plan, which was recently launched on 9th of this month by the Prime Minister, this plan aims to achieve it projects that there would be a scope for having about 6 to 7 million electric vehicles of all kinds, different segments, two-wheeler, three-wheelers, cars, buses, and also the entire range, that is hybrid and pure electric, the entire range of the hybrid and electric. But this scope of or this potential is not going to be achieved on as-is, where-is scenario, or the policies on as-is, where-is scenario. We will have to overcome certain challenges. And what are the challenges? The challenges are primarily relating initially first to the technology of the electric vehicles per se, its cost affordability, technology primarily in the battery chemistry and the battery management, cost affordability because the additional cost of, by and large, it is lithium ion as of today, but people are looking at alternate chemistries, but the additional cost of the battery, which imposes almost 20 to 30% additive cost on a comparable ICE engine vehicle, that has to be overcome. The consumer acceptance, because there are issues of range, there are issues of top speed or pickup, things of that kind, or even the space requirements for larger battery packs. So all this puts a lot of pressures on, and these are the challenges which are there before us to overcome before we can say that we can achieve this potential target of 6 to 7 million vehicles. Almost every other country in the world today in the advanced automotive sector, whether it is Germany or US or some Scandinavian countries or Japan, everybody is looking at accelerating the adoption and manufacture of the electric mobility vehicles in their country. Germany has put a target of, I think, 1 million cars by 2020. Similarly, other countries have also gone in for some kind of targets. So all these challenges have to be overcome by a set of policy and implementation mechanisms which the policymakers and the administrations in the respective countries and states in India have to put into. The policies have to be primarily on creation of demand, which is the very primary need of the hour, because without demand, the manufacturers can't produce in scale and they can't lower down the cost and make it much more affordable for the consumer to buy. At the same time, there have to be investments put into R&D to upgrade the component, the assemblies, the OEM structure, to match the requirements and to keep on upgrading the levels of efficiency in the electric drivetrain. The last but not the least is also the infrastructure issue, which is the hallmark of this conference. Even though most studies would indicate that the majority of the charging by individuals for their cars or two-wheelers is done primarily during the night time at their homes and partially during the off time in their offices or in their workplace. Still, the public has this kind of mental block that if they are stranded in anywhere in the market or on the road, what will happen to them? And as against an IC engine car or a two-wheeler which you can go to the petrol bunk and fill up your tank. For electric charging, it would require some amount of time, maybe 15-20 minutes, even in a rapid charging kind of scenario. So this is another handicap which has to be overcome. And these things have to be overcome by policies, a set of policies. So we are looking at so many issues of whether it can be married into a smart grid system. Of course, smart grids have to come first in India. In many other countries, they are existing. In India, there are initial phases of it, and I hope and we are hopeful that it would catch on and it would add to the electric mobility initiative. So, apart from demand incentives, there would be requirement for R&D upgradation. There would be requirement for public charging infrastructure provision as well. So if all these things can come into place, and with the smart grid initiatives which are now being put into place, we are hopeful that the peak load or the absolute load also which would be required, which we have estimated that would require about 700 to 800 megawatts of power for charging these 6 to 7 million target vehicles which I talked about in the beginning. So on the whole, as against 2 lakh megawatt of installed capacity in the country today, and which is increasing at the rate of something like 10 to 15,000 megawatts per year, it may not look to be big, but if you count it against the kind of power cuts that we are facing across the country today, so I'm sure the normal consumer of power would find it objectionable, in fact, and he may question as to why you are going in for this initiative, which will actually put an additional burden on the power that is available to him, either as a residential or a commercial or a office consumer, whatever it may be. So it is in this context that today's seminar, today's conference assumes great significance, and we have with us a set of panelists today. We have, in fact, 4 of them. The first panelist before us is Dr. Rajit Gad, who is a professor in Henry Samueli School in Engineering and Applied Science at UCLA. And he is also a founder director of the Smart Grid Energy Research Center. Dr. Gad possesses a doctorate degree from Carnegie Mellon University, a master's degree from Cornell, and a bachelor's degree from IIT Kanpur. He has taught as a visiting researcher at UC Berkeley. He has been an assistant associate and full professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and was also a visiting researcher at Stanford University. So I'm sure he has a really, really good grips of the US scenario as far as this, apart from his international experience. Dr. Gad's current research interests include modeling and control of smart grids, wireless monitoring and control of distribution and consumer premise power grids. Dr. Gad's research at SMERC is currently funded by DOE, and UCLA is one of the 3 academic partners. He is a fellow of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. He has received the National Science Foundation Career Award, NSF Research Initiation Award, and several other awards as well. He has been a keynote distinguished speaker in various countries, including Germany, France, China, India, and he is with us here today. We would kick off the session with the panelists with the first session from Dr. Rajit Gad. I invite Dr. Rajit Gad to give his presentation. Thank you.